It's March Mania at Sports Interaction.
Wow.
NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, so much more. It's bananas. Bananas.
That was good spelling.
Thank you. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness exclusive games with insane odds you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet at Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code at the bottom of the screen. Or head to sportsinteraction.com/STPN to get started. It's 18 plus. Please play responsibly. Nailing the Apex with your host, Tim Hauraney. Brand new show on STPN. This is episode 5 of the Drive to Survive reaction series. And, Jesse and I are going to join Tim from time to time, but Tim's going to have episodes on his own, episodes with people in the paddock, other F1 journalists. This is going to be a great, great show. And there's a show Friday before the race and the qualifying, afterwards on Sunday, Monday, and then of course you're going to do a midweek show as well. So lots of Formula One content.
So much F1 content.
All the content.
And IndyCar.
Yes.
And IndyCar too.
One day.
Who's your favorite?
There will be a willpower in
Yeah, and there better be. I want there to be a Newgarden one too. I'm fascinated with him.
I'll see if we can get Joe New. Joseph's great. I remember I've known Joseph for a long time.
Yeah,
and he's like one of those drivers who you're like, how did you get into racing? Because you don't come from any money. Like he's like
those stories are the best ones.
His story is absolutely incredible. Like even for the part where he like breaks his wrist. And I believe it was Texas. He had a crash at Texas, and this is when he was with ECR. Broke his wrist, and was just like, I have to keep driving, or else I'm going to lose my seat. And that will be the end of like my career type mentality. And yeah, he had to, and he went.
Oh my God!
Okay, now that's a story you got to tell. That's incredible. Crazy.
He's at Team Penske now, like kicking butt. But like he's one of the, like if we're talking about like Americans in Formula One, like Logan Sargent deserves to be there. Joseph Newgarden deserves to be in Formula One too.
Right. There's a couple of McLaren guys too that you'd think, why haven't they given them a shot yet? But
man, Hope Colton heard it.
That's what I mean.
Off topic.
Yeah, I know. We'll get into it some other
whole
point.
episode in and of itself.
People who are not in Formula One who should be. That would be a great episode.
That is a great episode.
We'll do it. Okay, so I love this one because it starts with Ottmar. We finally get Ottmar. It's Ottmar Szafnauer, right? I spelled that, or I say that right? Okay, all right.
You guys do a lot of ironing?
Yeah, he's like, I like ironing and I like mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm like, that is Ottmar.
Two things that take time and patience.
Yeah.
I love it.
He's amazing. Now, he talks about his time with Aston Martin. He's like, you might remember me from this. And really, he was sort of a backseat driver to the Lawrence Stroll episodes of Drive to Survive before. And, how can he not be? Lawrence Stroll is a force. But what he said, and I thought this was interesting, is that he didn't like the pressure culture that Lawrence brought with him to the Force India, Racing Point, Aston Martin, team as it was over those 3-4 years. And you could kind of see where Ottmar wouldn't like that. Quiet, perfectionist, where Lawrence is loud and brash and bullish. But it's interesting, as soon as he resigned, he's got a job with arguably a better team.
I think one of the things for Ottmar at that point was it may have been when they brought in Martin Whitmarsh, and he ended up basically superseding him in decision making and at the top of the food chain, and then Ottmar kind of got bumped down a bit. And the way I look at Force India, Racing Point, Aston Martin, and the way I've like followed them around, I would say, looking at when he was there with Force India, having to tell the team like, hey, we don't have a lot of money. We may be bankrupt next week and you may all lose your jobs. And then trying to keep a team together through all of that and perform. And this is before Lawrence came in and scooped the team up and really saved them. Those are some hard times. Like that's for Ottmar to go through that and to have to be the face of it and try to keep everybody together. I mean, imagine the stress that you're going through because you literally have like 400 people, like their jobs are in your hand, and you got to try and find a way of keeping this team going because you don't have any money to kind of keep the operation.
Yeah, and they bring the British government officials in, and they're like, "You'll get paid this week."
Yeah, but
we're not sure about after.
And that was such a key part of that episode, and I think it was season 2, I believe it was. Yeah, I think it was season 2, where you see that and actually feel that, and it's like, wow, like, oh my God, this guy had to deal with a lot. And Lawrence comes in, picks up the team, makes sure everyone still has their jobs, is getting paid. He has invested a lot of money. He's saved a lot of people's jobs. He's added more jobs to this.
Created a factory.
Created a new factory coming online. Like, Lawrence has done a lot at this team.
And doubled the workforce, has he not?
Yeah. Like, they're up towards 600 employees almost now, if not more. Like,
wow.
They were at around 400 when Lawrence came in and bought them up. Like, to add 200 and something, 200 plus probably more employees to your staff is huge. But that being said, Ottmar was with this team through thick and thin. And I don't know, I don't know if this is true or not. This is from me looking from the outside, looking in. I don't know if he took maybe this hiring of Martin Whitmarsh coming in as like, hey, maybe I should be getting that job. I don't know how he perceived that. I just think that...
And Martin Whitmarsh does what?
He's high. I don't know what his full title is at Aston Martin right now, but he's like pretty high up there now. Mm-hmm. Like, he's in the executive branch. Like, he's way up there. So I don't know how Ottmar saw that. If it were me, I don't know. I would want to be promoted, right? Like, I had been with the team for so long. I'd done whatever. That's what I would probably want. I would probably want that, especially at Ottmar's age. Maybe, I don't know if he likes traveling as much as they do now.
It seems like he likes walking his dog.
Yeah,
go for a croissant.
Stroll.
But that brings up a whole other subject of, like, Formula One and how much they travel, and would you want that? Would you want at that age to travel?
Yeah. It's a very specific
much?
Lifestyle.
It is.
Yeah. You're a traveling road show.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I'm happy for Ottmar. He got this chance at Alpine, and it's great that we got to see an episode or two on him, because my interactions with him have always been great, and they haven't been otherwise, and he's always made time for me. And yeah, he's a great personality too. I think.
See, he is. He's very specific. And so Cyril Abiteboul, who was the guy who hired Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg and whatever, he replaced Cyril. And I guess the boss from Alpine that they actually interview on this episode of DTS says there was some things in the team that we weren't happy with the culture, and Ottmar has come in and calmed those things down and brought people together. Can you talk about what that might have been?
Couldn't tell you from, like, behind the scenes. I mean, obviously he's talking internal departments and things of that nature. He's not really talking about drivers or anything like that, because when Fernando came on the scenes, Fernando was like, hey, I'm getting another shot at Formula One. I'm coming back. This is great. Yeah. He was a team player. Yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with drivers or anything of that nature. It probably sounds like something that was going on behind the scenes.
Personality conflicts.
Yeah, maybe at, like, the different department heads. Maybe I'm not too sure. I just know that Ottmar is really good with people, and so a big part of team principle too is knowing who's going to work where and who's going to work well with who. So it's a lot that that job, you gotta do, right? So
and you sense how good he is with people and, like, relationships throughout this episode.
It pops out of the screen.
Oh yeah, really, and it's not something you notice in a lot of people. Like, it was something that you can tell. Like, he has this quality about him and his managerial skills. He can take care of relationships within the team.
Yeah, and these teams work so hard, right? I know, like, I just don't think, like, a lot of the fans maybe don't understand, like, just how difficult the sport is behind the scenes as well. Like,
and the amount of people.
And then how many hours they dump into working on these cars. And it's kind of like, when I hear people just slam a team, it's like, hold on a second. Like, you have no clue what, a team is dealing with behind the scenes, or how much work they have to do, or the human element of it, right? Like, because I think that, for me, that's important, right? Is the human element of all of it, and the team itself, and how much passion these employees have for the teams is huge, right? And I think for a guy like Ottmar, I think, he's a great team principal. I really do. And you've seen it happen with this season, like I had mentioned on our preview pod, where they nailed upgrades. There's a reason why they're nailing upgrades.
Guy like him. Now, what's interesting with Ottmar is, when you join this team, first off, you see Ottmar at his house, ironing his shirts, talking about cutting the lawn. And then it's such a juxtaposition because it takes him, who seems like he seems like your dad or your uncle who, who has like a cottage by the lake. Mm-hmm. And then it puts him in the most Hollywood spectacle, which is the unveiling of the Alpine livery. It's their first year as Alpine. They got the BWT, which I believe is an Ottmar sponsorship as well. The energy drink, BWT.
Well, yeah, because they were with Force India, they were with Racing Point, and then they were with Aston Martin for a season.
Because they were like green and pink, which is a bizarre look.
Yeah, you would have to think that BWT has something to do with what Ottmar does.
And then so they unveil this car, which I thought looked like a bubblegum pack when it first came out. Like it just,
I think it's unique.
It is unique.
I think it's really unique on the lineup.
It pops.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just does. Right?
I like it.
There's a lot of black on the grid.
Right.
A lot of black.
It's definitely unique, and I commend them for that.
What I love about Ottmar, you take him out of that with his dog, where he's cleaning up dog poop on a walk, and then he's like, see, here's the tricky bit with Fernando Alonso. It's getting him to play, to be a team player. Yeah. And then the camera goes directly to Fernando Alonso, and he's like, well, some people are heroes and some people are anti-heroes. Yep. And I'm the anti-hero.
And he owns it. He knows who he is.
He's one of the best quotes in Formula One.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fernando Alonso's like, he'll tell you he's the greatest.
Oh, yeah. It's great. I love it. Well, how can you not love that? Like, if you're a journalist or just anybody, how could you not love someone giving you a great line or a great quote? And you're like, yep, this is gonna work.
Exactly. It makes your job easier.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? But it's so much entertainment too. And then I think for your athletes, you want them to have personality. Exactly. You want them to tell you what they're thinking, right? That's what we all crave when we're with sports, right? I mean, sometimes we don't actually get everything that we want from our athlete. Like, we look at the athlete, we're listening to them, we're like, don't give me the PR speak. I want to know how you're thinking.
Give it to me real. Give it to me straight. Yeah. That's what's so great about Formula One press conferences too, is they're very honest. They're very honest.
Yes, they are.
One thing that you do see is a foreshadowing event between Ottmar and Fernando at that, where he says, don't worry, I'm going to help. And Fernando goes, good, we need it. Yeah. And it has to do, you think, with reliability. It seems like Fernando and Esteban Ocon have a pretty good back and forth. He's, Esteban's making fun of Fernando's wrinkles and stuff like that. But and I've asked you this on the other show, but what is Fernando like to work with on a daily basis? And what were his main gripes with Alpine last year? They finished fourth. A lot of people were like, why would you leave that?
Reliability. There were, we had mentioned on the preview pod, we were talking about Fernando, like you had just said there. And I always bring this up. Australia is a great point in the apex of Alonso's career at Alpine, where he's potentially going to qualify in the front row for an Alpine that is huge, huge. And I think we're only at that point, like maybe maybe 4 races in, and you're like, whoa, where did this Alpine come from? This is incredible, Alonso, and then he pulls off the track and he qualifies at the back. So not at the back, but I think he would qualify in the top 10 somewhere.
I had him on my grid rival that weekend because I was like blown away with his lap times, and I was so upset.
Oh yeah, you have to be.
Lost a lot of points.
But like, that's the thing, right? That's where it's kind of like, I'm giving this thing everything I got at 40 years old at that point. What are you guys giving me? Like, we need reliability. We need this. We can be further. As him being demanding, aggressive. We need perfection. We need this. And that's what Alonso brings to a team. And that's important to have as a driver. You need to be demanding and you need to be pushing if you want to do well in Formula One.
There's a third driver that they introduce in this episode, and this plays into a huge part.
I wonder why.
Yeah, weird. Well, I thought it was interesting that when they unveiled the livery, they usually it's just the 2 drivers that are driving. But Alpine made a definitive choice last year to say, we have Fernando, we have Esteban, and we have Oscar Piastri.
What's the number that they gave, how much they invested in him?
$4 million preparing for Formula One.
For a driver who's just a reserve. Not even a driver who's going to be on the racetrack at all.
Never raced in a Formula One race.
Crazy.
They put $4 million into one guy.
And then Vettel retires and everything gets blown out the window.
Right. And actually, what's fascinating is they have that there's a scene where Piastri's running with his agent, and his agent's Mark Webber.
Yeah.
And Mark Webber, who is, formerly the second best driver at Red Bull. And Mark Webber, I know from his book, Jesse, and this is what's so crazy about Mark Webber. He's one of those guys that's like, he's got like an iron soul. Okay. And so his whole thing is you get exactly what you deserve. No more, no less. That's his big quote. And Mark Webber's his agent. And that's where you can see where he's ice cold. He knows how the sport works.
Right.
So then they flash a little bit of Daniel not working out well with McLaren. But then they bring it back to Alpine.
That conversation that they have about Daniel in that boardroom on camera, I was shocked. Where they're just open and say, Daniel, it's not working. We need to look other directions. I was shocked that we got that behind the scenes look. And I think that lends to more of season 5 and that we're getting more of these very real conversations about people's livelihood. Daniel Ricciardo, $10 million driver.
$20 million driver.
$20 million. And there's a guy saying, he's not working. Let's get rid of him.
They paid him $18 million to go away.
Yeah.
And so then they go back. And this is where, because Vettel retires or announces he's retiring right before silly season, right before the summer break. And, you have this conversation, again, this access, where Fernando and Ottmar are having a conversation on the balcony.
Yeah, up there. And the camera's looking up, but they're still wearing the mics.
That's right. And Ottmar's like, okay, I'm a man of my word.
Friday.
Man of my word. And then it kind of flashes forward to, and they also have the birthday party, which is awkward. And then Ottmar also makes reference to the fact that he knows that a meeting's happened between Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso, and then the announcement comes. And so one of the things that Ottmar says is, I think there should have been more, or I wish there had been more loyalty in Fernando's part.
Yep.
What were your thoughts on that?
I
think, fair comment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel that they may have been dragging that contract negotiation out just a little bit too much. It probably shouldn't have been dragged out as much as it was.
Alpine was.
Yeah, because I think what ended up happening is Fernando wanted more than a 1-year deal. And I think there was a bit of, push and pull with that. It was like, okay, we're only going to give you a 1-year deal and this amount of money. And I think Fernando wanted a multi-year deal with more money and back and forth, because I think their goal and objective, Alpine's is to have Fernando back for another season, then put Oscar in the seat for 2024. And I think that was Ottmar's thinking.
He doesn't want to be a sitting duck. 1-year contract. I know you're bringing in a new young guy.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, where am I going to go? Because I still feel like I have, a lot of juice, left in me, and we'll find out this season if he does. I mean, looking pretty good, but regardless of all that, I was on SportsCenter that day, and I caught a lot of hell for this online. I said, great replacement for Sebastian Vettel is, and it's like Fernando Alonso. And I was like, there's a reason why I said Fernando Alonso during SportsCenter. Yeah. All right. So sure enough, a few days later, Fernando Alonso signs with Aston Martin. And essentially, I think it's super simple. I think it's just Lawrence calling up Fernando being like, what do you want? What do you need? And they kind of touch on it in DTS.
He says he got more money over there.
Yeah.
More money and more term.
Yeah, more term.
And so like,
gave him everything he wanted.
If you're a human being.
Could have been that simple.
And that's why I asked if it was a fair comment, because if you're a human being and you got a company that comes in and that goes, not only will we give you a raise, but we're going to give you more years. Who says no to that?
Right.
Nobody.
And we're a team on the rise too. It's not like they were some team that's like, no, they're a team. They're like, we're investing, we're doubling in size, we're making a factory. We need your expertise.
How do you blame Alonso?
You can't
at all.
So that's what I thought. Of all the things I've ever heard Ottmar say, I thought that was one of the most unfair comments, and he's pretty fair.
Yeah. I think he was a little hurt in the moment.
Sure.
They film those when those are happening. I think he's a little hurt by the driver, and I think with hindsight, he probably understand a little bit more. A guy's taking more money, more years.
Yeah. Right. So then we flash into Zach Brown, the guy that gets us excited. Most excited is Oscar Piastri. And there may be an opening there. And so this episode really is a setup for what comes next. And we'll cover that in episode 6. But there was, Piastri basically, they talk about it in this episode and they don't get into the fallout. Piastri goes to McLaren. And here's the thing. Ottmar gets up in front of the entire factory at Alpine and goes, Fernando's leaving, Oscar's taken over. And then the Alpine account tweets it, and Oscar Piastri says, and I remember this day, man.
Yeah.
I remember the day.
You covered the story so closely.
Oh.
You had some of that breaking news.
And Oscar says, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
What's your reaction when you're in that moment? You're covering F1. You're right there.
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, what just happened?
So nobody saw this.
It was weird because it was also happening at a weird time where McLaren was going after Alex Palou in IndyCar at Chip Ganassi, and then Chip Ganassi being like, we're going to have Alex Palou back at our team. And Alex was like, I never agreed to any of that. And
wow.
blah, blah. It was sort of a similar thing happening over in IndyCar, and then it happens over in F1. Like, I think it might have been like maybe a week, 2 weeks later. It was so eerie, and that's why I love how they put the tweets up in that episode. You see like Romain Grosjean like cut the popcorn.
Yeah.
You see the IndyCar drivers getting involved too, because they're all just like, oh yeah, we went through that. Let's go. And I was just like, I can't believe I am witnessing this. That was my thoughts.
So the reason I thought Mark Webber plays a big part of this is because Mark Webber is ice cold and has always been. How much of a mark did he make on this, and did they handle it the right way? Because if you look at it from the outside, Piastri was not. If Alpine had their plan, Piastri was not going to get a seat this year.
I don't have any like insidery information too much on that end. What I can tell you is that I know Mark was stoking a bit of the media behind the scenes early in the season with, telling a few reporters that, Nicky was going to be replaced by Oscar mid-season.
And Williams.
This deal is getting done. And like, I'm really close with that situation, and I'm like, that's not happening whatsoever. Like, I know exactly what's going on. That's definitely not happening. And so like, I kind of saw from an outsider's perspective on that end. I'm not too sure what Mark may or may not have been doing on the other end of things.
But there was something with Alpine where they thought that they had a contract with this guy. And for some reason, and I wonder if it's you're switching out the team head, so the new team head, Ottmar, doesn't know the particulars of that contract because, frankly, why would he? You
there
believe
was
that's
a lot
illegal?
in it too, yeah.
There must have been
some. That contract.
What was the loophole? Do you know anything about that?
Had something to do with timing. And like when they decided that they were going to like announce things, and Oscar may have already made a decision on something else because he had gotten word that Fernando was probably coming back. And I have a feeling that happened weeks prior to what transpired on, I believe it was August 2nd or August 1st. It was something like that, if I remember correctly. Because I was like going to go on vacation a bit and be like, put my feet up and relax a bit.
That's
and all of a sudden I'm like,
yeah. Let's not get
here we
too
go.
much
We got another week of this.
Episode 6.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
But I did do some research. At the time, this is how nerdy I got about this situation because there was no racing on. And there was no hockey on too. The head of Alpine Legal has been replaced since this situation.
Ooh.
So I
did not know
that tells you that there was a mistake. We'll get into the fallout next episode.
The most important part of episode 5.
Okay.
Checo finding out Vettel retired on camera.
Oh, that's great.
By them being like,
hey,
Vettel got Instagram. He's like, what? He got Instagram? And then he looks at his face and he's completely shocked by the fact that 1, he has Instagram, 2, he retired. Great moment. Great capture of the camera, getting that live on camera.
And we'll have more of these episodes coming out daily. Your Drive to Survive reaction episode with new member of SDPN, Tim Hauraney, on Nailing the Apex.